First theme of the parsha that I want to discuss is the pasuk that appears at the end of the parsha. We go to Perach Chaf Tes, pasuk Aleph, after we've gone through the Bikurim and after we've gone through the Vidor Meiser, and after we've gone through the curses, becomes Moshe summons all of Bnei Yisrael. Vayikra Moshe al Kol Yisrael. Moshe called all of Israel. Vayomer Alehem, he says to them, Atem Reisim es Kol Asher Asa Hashem Leinichem. God has seen everything that happened. You've seen everything that Hashem did with your own eyes. Be'eretz Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt. The Paro Kol Avadav Kol, so he did to Pharaoh and to his servants and to his whole land. Hamasos Agdolos, the wonderful, the great trials that that your eyes saw, the signs and the wonders, the great signs and wonders. Now here's the pasuk: Hashem did not give you a heart to know, and eyes to see, and ears to hear until today. What does that mean? God didn't give you a heart to know and eyes to see and ears to hear until today. What does that mean? What does that mean? So we'll go to Rashi. Rashi says, you didn't know about the kindness of God and to cleave to him until today. What happened today that's different? Says the Rashi, very powerful Rashi. Rashi says, Shamati. Rashi says, I heard. So what does that mean, I heard? What does that mean, I heard? Rashi is speaking very modestly. Doesn't have a source for this idea. He heard it. Now, Rashi's hearing is much better than our hearing. It's not like we heard it as, somebody speaking over on the bus. Rashi heard it. He heard it from the Velt. So he says, I heard Sha'osu Ayom, that day, Shenas and Moshe Sefer HaTorah of Levi, that this is referring to, that this is Sha'osu Ayom, that day was that there was that day on which Shenas and Moshe Sefer HaTorah of Levi. Moshe gave the Torah to the sons of Levi. What's this a reference to? We have to go back a little bit. Chapter 26, verse 16. What does it say in chapter 26, verse 16? It says, Hayom hazeh Hashem elkecha mitzavcha asot et hachukim. On this day, Hashem your God commanded you to do these laws, as the mishpatim and the judgments, vishamarta v'asito sam, and you shall guard them and do them b'chol v'avcha v'chol nafshecha. You shall do the b'chol v'avcha v'chol nafshecha. You should do them with all your heart, and you shall do them with all your soul. So here, hold on one second. We know about the word there also. Rashi has a comment on the word hayom, meaning to say, there also, the word hayom is not meant to be taken as today. It's meant to be taken in a larger sense. We'll come back to what the pasuk says in Perek Zayin and Rashi's commentary on that in a moment. But first, I want to share with you what Rashi says on this verse. And after we share what Rashi says on this verse, we'll go back to Perek Zayin and see how Rashi understands the word on that day there. But it says, I heard Sha'osu Ayom Shenas Moshe Sefer Torah of Levi. So Rashi is saying, I heard that there was a day. It's not this day, but there was a day that that Moshe gave the Torah to the children of Levi, to the tribe of Levi. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote a Torah, and he gave a Torah to the tribe of Levi, as it says, Vayina'al HaKohanim b'nei Levi. It says it was given to the Kohanim, the children of Levi. Here we have to go to chapter 31, verse 9. So we already have to go back to chapter, hold on. We already have to go back to chapter 27, but first we go to chapter 31, verse 9. And there it says, in the pasuk, "Vayachtov Moshe as a Torah zos," that Moshe wrote a Torah. Vayinal Kohanim b'nei Levi hanosim es Aron Brit Hashem al kol ziknei Yisrael. And Moshe wrote a Torah and he gave it to the Kohanim, the children of Levi, who were carrying the ark. So this tells us, Rashi says, Kishnigmara Kula Nisana Livnei Shivto. When the Torah was finished, Moshe gave it to the tribe of Levi, because that's the tribe that Moshe came from. So he gave the entire Torah to that tribe. And it was only after the rest of Bnei Yisrael proved their attachment to it that he also gave the Torah. So first thing that Moshe did was write a Torah and give it to his own tribe to keep. And that was the tribe of Levi. So the first people who were given the entire Torah written down in order, the way we have it today, was the tribe of Levi. So that day that Moshe gave the Torah to the sons of Levi, it says, Bo kol Yisrael v'nei Moshe. All of Israel came before Moses. And they said to him, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our master. Afanu amanu b'Sinai. We also were standing at Sinai. V'kibalnu as a Torah. We also accepted the Torah. V'nis noanu, it was given to us. Mata mashlit es b'nei shivtecha aleha. Why do you put the sons of your tribe in charge of it? V'yomru lanu machar. Tomorrow they're going to say the Torah wasn't given to you. Lanu nitna, it was given to us. Meaning to say, what's going on here? Moshe Rabbeinu wrote a Torah, and he says, I'm giving my Torah to the tribe of Levi. They're the ones who he thought were most deserving to keep the Torah. The other tribes came forward, and they were upset, and they said, I don't understand. We don't understand, they said. We also were standing at Sinai. We also were given these commandments. And now the tribe of Levi is going to say that they're better than us. And they're going to say they're the ones who got the Torah and not us. When Moshe heard this, V'samach Moshe al davar. When Moshe heard this, he was very happy. This is one time that people complained, and Moshe Rabbeinu was very happy about their complaints. Regarding this, he said to them, he says, now we go back, that this is the reference in chapter 27, which we'll go back and read the Rashi on that in more depth. But this is what Rashi says. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying in chapter 27, verse 9. He says, today you have become. Earlier we had gone back to chapter 26. This is another reference to the word Hayom, which is in chapter 27. He says, Hayom hazeh niyeh l'am. This day you have become a people. Meaning to say, Hayom hazeh havanti she'atem dveikim v'chafetzim b'makom. Now that I see your desire and your yearning for the Torah, your desire and your yearning for the Torah, that's how I understand. Now I understand this that you're a nation. So let me just summarize, and then let me just look at the commentary with you of Rashi on the other two verses. Basically, what happened was Rashi, the pasuk says, Moshe Rabbeinu says to the people, you didn't have the heart, you didn't understand, you couldn't see until this day. What happened on this day? What's he referring to? What is this day? So Rashi tells us that was a day where when Moshe Rabbeinu gave the Torah that he wrote, Moshe Rabbeinu himself wrote a Torah, he gave it to the tribe of Levi. And the Bnei Israel said, no, we also want the Torah. They had this just incredible desire for the Torah. When they said, no, we also want the Torah, then Moshe Rabbeinu said, oh, now I know your desire. Now I could see your desire to have the Torah. For this reason, I now understand that you have the heart to understand and the eyes to see and the ears to listen on this day. And now I know what was it about this day? So this was the day that they desired for this. But Rashi earlier has about the word of the day, he has two powerful explanations. Rashi says, and he basically says it something very, very similar. He says in chapter 27, verse 9, Vayidaber Moshe HaKohanim Alavim, And Moshe and the Kohanim and the Leviim all spoke to Bnei Israel, saying, Haskes, pay attention, Ushema Yisrael Hayom Hazeh, Am Hashem Okecha. This day you have become a people to Hashem your God. Why does it say again these words, this day? So Rashi says, B'chol yom yu beinecha kilu hayom bata imo b'bris. This was the day where the Bnei Israel stood to receive the covenant from Moshe Rabbeinu, from God with Moshe Rabbeinu. And so Moshe Rabbeinu said, every day should be like this day, like the day that you received as though you received the covenant. Every day, as a Jew, has to be like the day that you first became a Jew. Now, many of us were born Jewish, but we should imagine what it was like to have to become a Jew, or to not be born Jewish and become a Jew. The Piazetzner Rav, the Eish Kodesh, who was a descendant of Rabbi Elimelech, he said, I wish I could convert to Judaism. That's what he said. I wish I could convert to Judaism, because that's the way I love Hashem, and that's the way I love being Jewish, so much so that I wish I could have converted to Judaism as an expression of my love for God. And the Rashi says a very similar comment in chapter 26, verse 16. Rashi says there on the pasuk says, Hayom hazeh Hashem Elokecha mitzavcha la'asos es hachukim ha'ela. This day Hashem is commanding you to do these laws and these judgments. V'shamarta v'asita otam. And you should guard them and do them with all your heart and all your soul. And Rashi says about this, B'chol yom yu beinecha chadashim, kilu bo bayom nitztaveita alayim. Every day they should be new in your eyes, as if you were commanded regarding them that day. That every day we do a mitzvah, it has to be that's the first time, like this was the first time we were given the commandment to do this mitzvah. That's the concept behind the word Hayom. So these are some of the explanations of the word Hayom Hazeh. Is basically, if you take the three Rashis together, is taking basically an approach to saying it speaks of a deep desire. This day has to be a deep desire to study Torah, a deep desire to connect with Hashem, and a deep desire to be in a deep relationship with God. Okay, so this is the first thing I want to tell you, because it's very powerful to me to hear about how Moshe Rabbeinu wrote a Sefer Torah and gave it to the tribe of Levi, and all the other tribes were clamoring and desiring and saying, we want the Torah as well. Let me just pause for a moment, see if anybody has any questions about some of this. I'm going to pause for a moment. The next piece that I want to discuss with you, we're going backwards, is the concept called as Vidui Meiser, the confession over the tithes. What does this mean? What is this confession over the tithes about? So first we'll read these psukim together, and then after we read these verses together, these four verses, after we read them together, then we'll look at some of the midrashim and some of the Hasidic commentary. But first I want to read it with you with Rashi, so you have basic familiarity with what we're referring to when we say this concept of confession over Meiser. Of course, we're in the season of confession, so we have to know the text in the Torah which talks about confession. It says in chapter 26, verse 12, Ki techalel aser, es kol masar t'vuascha b'shana shlishis. And I would like to say that I think that I was in for a surprise when I had the realization about what the paradigmatic text about confession is actually talking about in the Bible. That this is very important for us as we go into the confessional season of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, of Slichos, of Aseret Yimei Tshuva, where the important thing is to confess. We'll see what is the paradigm of confession. It's such an ironic teaching that needs to be, in my opinion, amplified. It says, Ki techalel aser, when you complete the tithing For the third year, the year of the tithe. And you gave it to the Levite, the convert, the orphan, and the widow, and they will eat in your gates for Saveyu. They'll be satisfied. What is this a reference to? What are the tithes that we're talking about? So just a basic primer. Now, when a person has, according to everyone, if he has grain, dagan, tirosh, if he has wine, and yitzar, oil growing in his fields, he has to take a tithe, several tithes. First, he has to take a tithe and give it to, this is called the truma, and that's given to the Kohen. That is either 1/40th, 1/50th, 1/60th, or though biblically speaking, it's any amount. Then he has to give meiser. And the meiser, in the Bible, it's supposed to be given to the Levites. But then Ezra made a reform. He penalized the Levites, that it was given to the Kohanim, because the Levites did not go up from Babylon. Then in addition to that, we look at it as a 6-year cycle or 7-year cycle. And the first and second of this 7-year cycle, he gives a secondary tithe called Meiser Sheni, which he has to take the produce and eat it in Jerusalem. And then the third year of this 7-year cycle, it's the 7th year, the sabbatical year, and the third year, he has to give a Meiser Ani, a tithe to the poor. So now in this verse, he is saying, Ki techalel aser, when you completed your tithes, all the Meiser of your grain in the third year, meaning to say you've given all your trumos, you've brought your Meiser Sheni to Jerusalem, you've given the tithe to the poor, and you gave it all away. We'll look at the Rashi, but first I want to do the verses. Marta, you shall say, Lefnei Hashem Elokecha, and you shall say before Hashem your God, Bi'arti HaKodesh Min HaBayit, a very powerful phrase. I have eliminated the Kodesh, the holy things, i.e., which things? The Truma, the Meiser, from my house. The Gam Nesativ Levi V'Lager, I gave it to the Levite, the convert, the orphan, and the widow. I did everything you commanded me. I did not violate your commandments. I didn't forget anything. I did not eat it in a state of intense mourning. And I did not consume it while I was in a ritually impure state, which is a severe penalty. And I'm not giving it to a dead person. Meaning to say, that's itself going to be a question. What's that referring to? Rashi is going to have to tell us based upon the Gemara, based upon the Sifrei. And then it says, B'ko Hashem Elokecha, Shemati B'ko Hashem Elokai. I listened to everything that Hashem said to me. Asiti k'chol asher tivitani. I did everything that you command me. Hashkifa, and then he finishes off the confession. Hashkifa mim'on kadshecha, gaze down. Well, let's leave that verse out because I'm not sure if it's part of the actual confession. So these are the 3 verses that make up the confession. And I would like to first read them with the Rashi and then understand what we're saying, and then ask the question, why is this a confession? Why is this a confession? That's the fundamental question that is bothering me. Not just me, all the commentaries on this. So, when you complete the tithe in the third year, you finish tithing every tithe of your produce of the third year, Rashi says, when you complete tithing every tithe of the third year, kavazman abior v'avidoi, fix the time of the elimination of tithes and the confession. When are you supposed to do this confessional prayer? Be'erev Pesach shel Shana Revius, in the eve of Pesach of the 4th year. Means to say that on the eve of the 4th year, you say, I gave away all my tithes from the first 3 years. And Rashi now proves this from associations. As it says, at the end of 3 years, you shall take it out, and it says Miketz, and it says later on Miketz Sheva Shanim with respect to Hakel, just so it's a festival. And so there, Rashi proves that this refers to Pesach. Okay, that's the first thing. The Rashi says that when are you supposed to recite this confessional prayer? On the eve of Pesach, going into the 4th year. Shna Samaiser, Rashi says that this refers to a year in which there is only one tithe of the 2 tithes that are applied in the 2 years which preceded it. Meaning to say, why is the 3rd year called the year of the tithes, even though the tithes are separated in the 1st and 2nd year? So why is the 3rd year called the year of the tithes? And the reason is because in the first 2 years, there was the custom to give the Ma'aser Rishon, the tithe to the Levites, and the second tithe, which was eaten in Jerusalem. So there you had 2 tithes. And here the Torah is saying the 3rd year that there's only one tithe, the tithe to the Levites. And instead of the tithe to bring it to Jerusalem, you have to give the tithe to the poor, which is not called a Ma'aser. It says V'nesatu Levi. So therefore, this is called a tithe of the poor. Okay, so now we learn something else. That this is in the 3rd year, you separated your tithes, and you have to say the confessional that you got rid of all the tithes before Pesach on the 4th year. So now it says, and v'achul b'sharecha v'saveil, you've enjoyed. Now we're coming up to the point. Up until this point, you've enjoyed your food. So now you have to give it to the poor to enjoy it. So Rashi says on this basis, we have the citation from the Mishnah, Ein pochatin ani begorin pachos mechatzi kav chitim. When the poor man comes to the threshing floor to collect, to give him at least half of a kav. Okay. And what do you say? You say before God, hisfada. You shall confess, declare shenatata masrosecha. You should declare and confess that you gave your tithes. And what do you say? This is what you say as part of your confessional prayer. Biarti HaKodesh min habayis. I've eliminated the holy things from the house. That refers to the Ma'aser Sheni and the Neter Ravai. And what's the Neter Ravai? Is another gift is another obligation that the tree that was planted in the sapling in its 4th year, you have to take the fruits and eat them in Jerusalem. And the verse is teaching us that if you delayed by giving your tithes for the first 2 years and you're not bringing to Jerusalem, then now after the 3rd year you have to go up. And he says, I've given it to the Levite. That's the first Ma'aser. And also that includes the Truma and the Bikurim. And to the convert, the widow, and the orphan, this refers to the tithe of the poor. Like all of the commandments, Rashi says, it means I gave them in their order. What's the proper order? First comes the first fruits. And then comes the Truma. And then I give the Levites, the Ma'aser. And then the Trumas Ma'aser. Well, then the Levite gives the Trumas Ma'aser. And then Ma'aser Sheni. And then you're not supposed to change the order. What is the next thing we learn out from here? I did not violate any of your commandments. What does that mean? Well, if Rashti, mimin al she'eno min, you have to separate the tithes appropriately from the same species and from the new on the new and the old on the old. I didn't take a tithe from the old grain and say, there I thereby exempted the new grain. Okay. Below shechachti, Rashi says, what does this mean? I did not forget to bless you when I was separating these tithes. So this is the idea that while I was giving these tithes, I took stock and I did a proper blessing to God at that moment. And I did not eat it while I was in a state of aninut, in a state of intense mourning, where it's forbidden for a person who's in mourning to recite this prayer. And I did not consume it while I was in a state of ritual impurity. V'lo mimenu l'meis, and I did not give it to the dead to use it for a coffin. Shamati b'kol Hashem Elokai. I listened to the voice of God, and I brought it to the temple. I did everything that you commanded me. Rashi says that this means samachti, I rejoiced, v'simachti bo, and I brought the joy to others with it. Now he asks the fundamental question: why is this called a confession? He's saying I did everything right. He's saying in this verse, I did absolutely everything correctly. So why is that called a confession? Why is this called a confession? Anybody have an answer to this question? Why is this called a confession if he did everything right? It's called Vidoy Meiser. So let us all first go to look at the Midrash Halacha on this. Hold on. Here we go. We have a lot of Midrash Halacha on this. A lot of Midrash Halacha. Okay, so this is what it means. We'll go and cite these verses. So there's a lot to learn from here. First of all, there's always a question about the tithes. Okay. Okay, so Bi'arti HaKodesh Min HaBayis. So one reason why you have to say why this is called a tithe, I thought of two explanations. One explanation is that this is just an idea that confession should not come from a sense of shame. Confession, what we call confession, should come from a sense of accomplishment. Now, when we start our own confessions to help us improve the way we're acting, we shouldn't start by criticizing ourselves. We should start by finding all those things we did wrong and then try to improve it. So that's why this is called Vidoy Meiser. It's called a confession when you did it right. If you didn't do it right, if you didn't do anything right, you wouldn't even be saying these confessions. That's the first idea. A second idea about this is this phrase, Bi'arti HaKodesh Min HaBayis, that the Torah says that the person confesses that I got rid of the holiness from my house. But you're supposed to get rid of this holiness from your house. You have to give the tithe to these people. But still, even though you have to do it, still, nevertheless, what you've done is you've taken holiness and you've removed it from your house. So this is a powerful concept that sometimes you have to do a necessary action, but if as a result of it you've removed holiness from your house, it's still something that you need to confess over. This phrase, Bi'arti HaKodesh Min HaBayis, is like a haunting phrase, and the last verse is Hashkifa Mimon Kachecha, that you're asking God to look down and bless you at this time. So those are the two explanations I was thinking of why this is called a Vidoy Meiser, why it's called a confession over Meiser, even though you actually did everything right. The first is it's just to teach us a general lesson that you're supposed to confess by focusing first on the positive things you said. And second is because it's to remind us that even though you were supposed to do this, if you in any way lower the holiness of your house, Bi'arti HaKodesh Min HaBayis, that is something that's something that requires confession about it. So there was the Hasidim talk about this, Biarti akodesh min habayis, that somebody who gets rid of the holiness from their house, that is the Rashi Tavos, the first letter of each of those words spells behema, animalistic. That sometimes we have a responsibility to meet our animal needs, but as a consequence, we've gotten rid of holiness. There was one person, he had to sell one of his Sfarim, and then he was about to sell his holy Zohar, and then he had a dream. Be artia kodesh v'nabayis, meaning to say you're getting rid of your holiness to fulfill this mitzvah, this animalistic mitzvah. That's one idea. Another idea from the Tiferes Shlomo, the Radomska Rebbe. The Tiferes Shlomo is the one who sent everybody to Rebbe Elimelech's grave on the yard site. It says, "Habiarti esakadusha min habayis." What you're saying is, I got rid of the holiness from the mitzvos that I did in my house. Therefore, and so this is the idea that somehow we are confessing about the mitzvos that we have not done enough of the mitzvos in our house. So, okay, that's the first thing. Another thing that the commentaries comment on this phrase is lo avarti mitzvosecha. I did not pass over any of your mitzvos, v'lo shachachti, and I did not forget. So we have some comments on this from the Rebbes. So the Sfas Emes, the Ger Rebbe, asked this question. I don't understand. In mekaimim es mitzvah, if you're actually fulfilling this commandment, hari memela in shochachim. So for sure you're not forgetting it. What does it mean? I did not violate your commandments, and I did not pass over your commandments, and I did not forget them. So he says that's not true. We see it's not true, that you can sometimes fulfill the mitzvah and while at the same time forgetting it. Meaning to say, he says this phrase, it's possible to forget a mitzvah even though to the eye it appears that you're fulfilling it. If you do this mitzvah without kavanah, if you do it without focus, without intentionality, if you do it just out of routine, and you do it basically in a manner in which you're distracted, you're not focused on the mitzvah. That's called shechacha. So you're saying, "Lo avarti al mitzvasecha," I kept your mitzvos, and I also didn't forget. Meaning to say, I did the mitzvahs with proper kavanah for the purpose of connecting with God, of cleaving to God. And so, meaning to say, here's both of these things. I did the mitzvah, I did the tithes, and I didn't do it without the proper intentionality. I did it with the proper intentionality. This month of Elul, it goes without saying, is the time for us to increase intentionality into our thoughts and into our prayers. This is what this is. This is the time of the month to do that. This is the time of the year to do that, to increase our intentionality when it comes to prayers. In this context, I started praying recently with the gartel. One of the reasons why I started wearing the gartel is a black belt, is to help me have increased intentionality with my prayers. So we couldn't just go and say them by rote. And that's one of the things that we're supposed to focus on. That's what it's saying. I did not pass over the commandments and I did the commandments and I didn't forget to have intentionality. But another explanation comes from the Sukkot Rebbe, and he quotes the Rashi, quoting the Mishnah Meiser Sheni, chapter 5:11. He says, I did not forget to bless you. But this is a question. What do you mean I did not forget to bless you? Blessings, almost every blessing with the exception of possibly two blessings, are rabbinic. So what does this mean here? I did not forget to bless you. Why is he making a confession over that? So the Rimagash, who's the Rimagash? The Rimagash was the teacher, the Rebbe of Rambam's father. He was the Rebbe of Maimon. So the Rimagash says that this blessing, that the intentionality here, that he says, I did not forget to recite this blessing, is a reference to which blessing? He says that this blessing is biblical. Anybody know which blessing he's going to say? It's a very powerful idea. Which blessing do you think he's going to say, which is a biblical blessing? If you had to pick one blessing, which is a biblical blessing, what would you say? He says this is a reference to the blessing of Shehecheyanu. Most people don't say that that's a biblical commandment, but he says, the Rimagash says that this is a reference to the blessing of Shehecheyanu. Thank you, God. Shehecheyanu v'kimanu v'giyanu as manazeh for thanking for Shehecheyanu v'kimanu that you sustained our life and sustained us and brought us to this moment. He says that is a biblical commandment, and that's what this is a reference to. I did not forget to give you this blessing of Shehecheyanu, of appreciating my life. The main mitzvah, what's the main mitzvah? The main mitzvah is the desire of man to want to do a mitzvah. And you have to do the mitzvah from the depths of your heart. And so therefore he desires, when will this mitzvah come to me so I can uphold it? So that's the idea here. And that's what he's saying, that a person is saying, I did not forget to appreciate the power of being able to do a mitzvah. I didn't gloss over your mitzvahs. The first approach of the Sfas Emes was, I did it with intentionality. And the Sakhachover Rebbe says, I didn't forget to say a Shehecheyanu. I didn't forget to appreciate the moment and the desire to connect to you, God. Not just the intention to do the mitzvah, but the desire to connect to you while doing this mitzvah. Another idea is brought down. So there's another idea here, that what's the connection between I did not violate your commandments, and I did not forget. What's the connection between not violating your commandments and not forgetting? So it's brought down in the Midrash Rabbah to Akev that there was once an incident with Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, that he went to one city and there were a lot of mice who were eating things up in the city. They had an infestation of the mice. And they came to Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair and they said, what can we do about these mice? So he said, if you will give your tithes properly, then the mice won't bother your stuff. And the Gemara in Haryos says, he quotes the Gemara, the last daf of Haryos, Yud Gimel, it's 13 dafim. He says, somebody who eats from what a mouse eats, if you eat from what the mice have eaten, you're going to forget your learning. And so therefore, when you separate your tithes, you say, I gave the mitzvos, I gave the tithes properly, I gave the charity properly. And so therefore, I did not forget my studies, because I didn't eat from a mouse, meaning to say there was no infestation. Because I gave the tithes properly, there was no infestation of mice. And then it says in the pasuk, I did not eat from it in a state of, oni is usually translated as intense mourning. So what does it mean I did not eat from it, but only, which is in a state of intense mourning? So here we have the comment of the Divrei Shaul. I think that is the great grandfather of our friend Shaul Weinreb. It says, the intent is to that which Rambam writes in Laws of Yom Tov, chapter 6, law 18, that when a person eats on and drinks on Yom Tov, a person is obligated to feed the convert, the orphan, and the widow with the other poor. But somebody who, and this is relevant for us, but somebody who locks the doors of his household and he eats and he drinks with his wife and his children, and he doesn't give to the poor people and to the bitter souls and to the downtrodden, he doesn't give them to eat, that is not the rejoicing of the mitzvah, that is rejoicing of his belly. And about that, Rambam says, your sacrifices, zivchechem kulachem onim lahem kol ochav yitma'u kilachmam l'nafsham. And it curses those sacrifices. It calls those sacrifices cursed sacrifices. So basically the onin is somebody who eats by himself without supporting others to eat. And that's what it means, lo achalti ba'oni mimenu, meaning to say, I did not eat from my bread alone. I shared it with others. I did not eat from it alone as though it was lechem only, the bread that I was hoarding to myself and not giving to the poor people to eat. But rather, I shared it with the poor. That's the way the Divrei Shaul explains it. Asiti kecho asher tzivani. I did everything that you commanded me. Rashi here, we read the Rashi, and Rashi says something a little bit opaque. He says, I rejoiced with everything you gave me, and I caused others to be rejoiced. So this says the rabbis, that this is the essence of the Torah, that the entire Torah is, the whole Torah is, as Rabbi Akiva said, is included in the commandment of love your neighbor like you love yourself. And by causing others to rejoice, you have fulfilled the mitzvah of love your neighbor like yourself. Like kechol asher tzivisani. This is everything that you've commanded me. So the greatest mitzvah we can do, since the whole mitzvah is love your neighbor like you love yourself, the greatest mitzvah we can do is to, just like we want to be in a good mood, is to cause others to be in a good mood. And now we have the verse, which I said we'll hold off till a little bit later, because this is the last verse of this confession. Hashkifa mi ma'on kadshecha. Gaze down from your holy castle, min hashemayim, from heaven. Uvarech es amcha es Yisrael, and bless your people Israel, and the land that you gave to us. Kasher nishbata lavosenu, like you swore to our forefathers, a land flowing eretz zavat chalav udvash, a land flowing with milk and honey. What does Rashi say this means? Asinu masha kazartalinu. We did that which you decreed upon us. We did the tithes just like you commanded. Asayat ta masha asot. Now you need to do what you God should do now. What is upon you to do. Shamarta, because you said if you walk in my ways and do my commandments, then I will give the rains in your time. Asher nasata lanu, that you gave to us, just like you swore to our fathers to give to us, and you fulfilled your oath, the land flowing with milk and honey. So what do we do with this phrase? Hashkifa mi ma'on kadshecha, asiti kechol asher tzivitani. I did everything that you have commanded me. I did everything that you've commanded me, and now it's your turn to gaze down from the holy abode above. So that's the way Rashi understands it. Because the previous verse says, Asiti kechol asher tzivitani, I did everything that you commanded me, therefore you now need to fulfill your part. That's how Rashi says it. So Rashi says, and the Kotzker Rebbe has a big problem with Rashi. Rashi says, Asinu masha gazartalinu, we did that which you decreed upon us. Asay ata masha lecho asot. Now you have to do what's your job to do. Rashi asks the question, I don't understand, says Rashi. Where is the decree here? There's no gezer here. There's no decree. Is it really a decree to say I did everything that you commanded me? So the decree is for us to be able to say, a harsh decree is for us to be able to say we kept your words, that we followed your words. So that's the idea that the Kotzker Rebbe is saying, that's decree. Hold on one second. Let me pause, see if anybody has any comments. Okay, so now I want to quote from the Baal Shem Tov about the verse that I was saying before, that after this it states, Hayoma zeh Hashem Elokecha mitzavcha la'asos es hachukim ha'ela v'es hamishpatim v'shamarta v'asiso sam b'chol v'afcha b'chol nafshecha. This day Hashem your God has commanded you to do these laws and these judgments, and you shall guard them, and you shall do to them with all your heart and with all your soul. Rashi says, each day, b'chol yom yu beinecha chadashim. Each day has to be new in your eyes, as though this was the day you were commanded about them. And this is what David said. This is what David said. Al tashlicheni le'isik na. He says, "Do not cast me away in old age." This is what we say as part of the Shema Koenu prayers on Slichos Aseret Tshuva. Shekiyum mitzvos yu etzli mitoch zrizus v'rananus, lo mitoch hergel v'atzelus. And what's David saying? I don't want to become old in my service of God. That's what David is saying. I don't want to become old in my service of Hashem. That the fulfillment of the mitzvah should always be for me fresh and uplifting, and not from rote or laziness. It's as though I was commanded upon them today. That's what the Baal Shem Tov says. The Chidushei Arim, also the Ger Rebbe says, that Moshe saw with Ruach HaKodesh, with the divine inspiration, and he saw that the future temple will be destroyed, the new fruits would stop, and so therefore Moshe stood up and started to say, instituted that we have to pray 3 times. Even though we have other sources for the idea of prayer for 3 times, this is what the Chidushei Arim says, quoting the Tanchuma. And so therefore, all of our prayers, and this is what I said yesterday in Yeshiva, all of our prayers are like the Bikurim, because the Bikurim is really an expression of gratitude, and all of our prayers are really an expression of gratitude. Hashem gives, that a man gives to God the first of his thoughts and his requests at the beginning of the day, and then the beginning of each time period. So, and this is really something that we have to discuss. Well, God willing, we'll get to it on Wednesday when we discuss the Bikurim passage in length. But all of our prayers are really the Bikurim. The Bikurim is that we're supposed to take the first of our fruits, and our prayers are really, we're supposed to take the first of our thoughts every single day, then give them over to God. And that's why people have noticed that's why I think it's so important to pray at sunrise, because that's the first of our fruits. That's the first of our fruits. So that's the reason why we have to. That's the reason why we have to do the first of our fruits, the first of our prayers at sunrise, because otherwise it's not the Bikurim. If it's not the first of our fruits, it's not the Bikurim. Anyway, that's the idea why in Rosh Hashanah we're going to pray at sunrise, God willing. Okay, we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address them.